everybody, we are back with another book. This is Books Do Not Have Wings, written by Brynne Barnes, that's me, and illustrated by Rogerio Coelho. I just love this book, but I just said the same thing about Colors with Me, right? I mean, it's hard not to. I just adore this entire production. Working on it was so much fun, and I was able to, kind of try my hand at conceptualizing illustrations when we were working on this book, and it was a great time, and I'm in love with the cover, right? I just love everything that Coelho did with this. And of course, I'm going to read it to you, and we're going to read the dust jacket. We are still talking about diversity in literature, children being able to see themselves on the page and how important that is. And so it is with great pleasure that I bring to you Books Do Not Have Wings. As you can see when I first opened the book, the story begins before the story begins, and I love that. The story begins with an illustration, not with words. And we see a little hand down here pulling a book off the shelf, and that's really where every great journey begins, right? When you flip open a book. So it's the end sheets here. We've got the title page. And we see a boy down here who is pulling back the page. So I'm kind of thinking it might have been his hand, right? Putting two and two together here. He's pulling back the page. And again, he is kind of ahead of the story. The story is ahead of itself. It has pages and pictures, a cover, it's true. Even words and a writer and readers like you. It can do anything that you want it to do. It's more than just a book. And so in this, I'm going to give you the analysis too as I'm reading, but in this you see he's pulling the page back, stepping on this ladder, and they're kind of venturing out into this new world. Right? This is them going out into the world of reading. Because books do not have wings. Books don't have engines or trampoline springs. And this, for certain, has all of those things. This is a sculpture, some fine work of art, a puzzle assembled for taking apart. It plumps up your thinker and fills up your heart, and where you end up is not where you start. Surely, it's more than a book. It can be a port of sorts. The dip of a ship on a trip, of course. A passage by pirates to faraway forts. This here is a submarine, a never-look-back pretended machine to explore the depths of the vast marine with urchins, seaweed, and schools of sardines. Come closer, dear reader, and see the unseen, this thing that's not a book. By the way, I just love this little fish down here. Where is it? Right there. This little robot fish amongst all the other fish. And then there's a submarine that looks like a fish. And of course, I have to point this detail out here because we are talking about illustration analysis as well, but we get the little cat here with the little pirate hat on. If you look, you will see it's a cunning old shrew, or the bubbling brew of lizard stew, tapping the toe of her crooked shoe, planning potions for ogres and princesses too. Let me get this really funky looking witch here. Suppose it's the gleam of a dream instead, nestled inside a dragon's head, who sleeps in the sky with clouds for a bed and stuffed stars with wishes that fly overhead. Though it comes to an end, do not be misled. This is not just a book. It's a flock of fairies chatting with trees and painting the colors on lilies and leaves, dusting the forest enchanted with glee, singing together in twos and in threes. I'm going to tell you right now, this is doing no justice to these illustrations. They are so brilliant. You have to see them in person. You just have to. It's older than old and newer than new. It can be what it is without someone like you. I'll tell you again, it's the truest of true. It's certainly more than a book. If it's not what it's not, then what could it be? Spectacles, perhaps, that might help you see? A tiddlywink, a rabbit hole, a cobblestink, a witch's mole, a whatchamaroo, an old moldy scroll, a doodly-doo, a long-bearded troll, a long afternoon in a cubbyhole, a flying balloon, or a porridge bowl, three little oinks, a pirate's right hook, an alien zoinks, even gobbledygook. A book is a book when all by itself, when it's closed and flat, alone on the shelf. If and only if you don't care to look, then and only then will it just be a book. And then these are the end sheets. So we begin with illustration and we end with illustration. And that's it. Thank you, Rogerio. Thank you, Sleeping Bear. This was just such a fun project to work on. And as you can see, as we're going to talk about symmetry in picture books, as we talk about asymmetry in picture books, and how two stories talk together, the visual and the written, and when we see visual and verbal together and how they're interacting. So you can kind of see that there's a little bit of asymmetry here that's 100% intentional. We see throughout that the narrator is insisting that this is not a book. Hey, you're reading it, but it's not a book. It has a beginning and an end, but it's not a book because it's so much more than that. And so we have here, it can do anything that you want it to do. It's more than just a book, because books do not have wings. And this does. This has all these things that books, little old regular books don't have this. But when you open up a book, it becomes something else in your hands with you reading the words. It can't be what it is without someone like you. So it was so much fun to write this and work on this, but also just giving you that example of symmetry and asymmetry, and the narrator insisting something to you over and over again that you know to be true, and yet the narrator is trying to get you to think of something, conceptualize it just in a different way. something that's a message that every child I think will enjoy and appreciate. Something that's a lot of fun. I think that you can use in your classrooms. And in addition, I just have to point out the intricate detail here, the things that keep you following through from page to page. So we talked about how picture books work. I want you to see that there is this constant movement. This is something the illustrator understands exceptionally well, from left to right, in the way that we read in English. And so we see this type of movement throughout. We see that he's closer to us here, this boy, and then we get to the girl, and then she's farther away. So we get this kind of trajectory going out into this world, going farther away from the world that we do know. And then we see both of the narrators down here because they're the visual aid that takes us through the book. If we're not seeing birds that are doing that, we're seeing balloons that are doing that. So we have all these what are called visual threads. We also can refer to it, I know in acting they refer to it as a through line. What's the through line? What's the thing that connects everything else? And so we have them jumping and hopping from book to book, from scene to scene, from page to page, and we need something visual to tie all those things together. So the birds in the background, they help to do that. The balloons around here, they help to do that. And then we have these kites up here that really ties very well into these floating images. These are like man-made birds, so it kind of combines the balloons and the birds together. It's really insightful, really genius. And I can say that because I'm not the illustrator. And so then we can see that all of these visual lines carry us through and bring our eye up to the ship, which will be on the next page, right? And as we're looking at this, we can see that there are still birds down here and balloons over here that are visually carrying us through. And I want to make a note that we are seeing, and I requested this, and I'm so happy to see it, that we're seeing diversity in the characters. So this is a book where it's not inherently about, it's not about race, it's not about diversity, but I wanted diversity to be something that we saw in here because it's a part of the world that we live in. And so we see two very different looking characters. We see a third character who looks different from these two, and so we can see that representation is happening here, and that was really important to me to see that on these pages. And then we get them on their ship, and on their ship they encounter the major pirate ship in this story, and we see the waves of the water becoming the ripples of the pages as they flip through the pages and journey through the book. We still see remnants of, we see the birds, we see these balloons flying back and forth. And again, this movement from up where the words begin down and out, which help to keep us turning these pages. We also see the ripples here in the background of that landscape underwater. And then we see this old shrew turning toward us, right? She's a witch. She's concocting spells. And so we see her turning, looking at us. We see our eye here where we can see this lizard stew, and it's green, of course, in order to show that in her bubbling cauldron. And then as we look over, we see that the movement just encourages our eye. The movement of all of these patches of fabric encourage us to move our eye down this way. Again, we've got the page kind of flipped back, right? Because these kids are jumping from page to page. And so even though it's almost like a Where's Waldo as far as where the kids are on the page. So they're down here on this spread. And then as we see this movement toward the dragon and the wishes that he's stuffing overhead in these little star balloons that he is holding that's wrapped around his paw or his claw. And then the same thing, I just want you to just observe, the movement of what the characters are doing, what the butterflies, which have now taken place of the birds, are doing in order to keep us looking from left to right. And here we see them on this makeshift sailboat. And we see the movement here from the stars into the glasses, into the world, seeing a world bursting out of the lens of each side of the spectacles here, so that we're able to see that we're supposed to keep moving this way, right? Moving this way. And so it's just a really fun example, I think, of when we talk about how picture books work, how we read pictures, and how we can see from left to right, that study movement, and what that does for us visually. It takes us on a visual journey while the words take us on a verbal